Hey, what's going on guys? Oscarmini here, and today in this video I bring to you my review of the Redmi Note 9S after about a month of using the smartphone. I think I've actually used this device for a little over a month now, and I'm going to share with you guys the pros, the cons, and my thoughts as always on the device I use on this channel. And so without taking much of your time, yo guys, let's get started. So this is the Redmi Note 9S, which is also called the Redmi Note 9 Pro in some regions. It was actually launched alongside the Redmi Note 9, the Note 9 Pro Max, all running on the same Snapdragon 720G chipset, except for the Note 9, which runs on the Helio G85 processor, and little variations here and there. Although the naming here is kind of somehow, it's a lot actually, the Redmi Note 9S is great value for money, and I have my reasons here, which I'm going to discuss in this video. But before I get ahead of myself here, let's head into the unboxing of the smartphone, the Redmi Note 9S. The unboxing here is typical of Redmi devices. You get the smartphone itself from within the box, the other smaller box here that houses the SIM ejector tool, the silicone TPU case, the massive user manual with several languages, and straight down to the box you get a whopping 22.5 watts charger for fast charging here, a USB-A to Type-C cable to charge up this device and data transfer also. And here you do not get earbuds from the smartphone. Now this device is definitely one that's actually large. It's on the large side. Not the biggest device I've actually reviewed on this channel, but it is a handful. On a close inspection of the Note 9S, it feels like a plastic slab sandwiched with Gorilla Glass 5 at both the front and the rear. The bottom features from left to the right the 3.5mm jack port, micro USB port, the mouthpiece opening, and the down-firing speaker grille. While the top side here still gives you that IR blaster to control your home electronics and a secondary mic opening. Obviously the front has a 6.67-inch Full HD with dot display, the earpiece and little notification LED directly above the notch too, leaving the rear, which is a glaring fingerprint magnet, with a quad camera bump, yeah that's a camera bump here, that can be taken away using the case included within the box. I'll really touch on the cameras later in this video, or you could skip right now to that section with the timestamps in the description below. You get no fingerprint sensor at the rear, and that's because the biometric fingerprint sensor is mounted to the right side, doubling as the power button just beneath the volume rocker keys. One thing I don't like about this placement, maybe because my hands are not the largest out there, is how far up this fingerprint sensor is. And here's what I mean. The Infinix Note 7 is a bigger device with the same side mounted fingerprint sensor, but actually easier to unlock that smartphone because the sensor was pushed a little lower than what you get from this smartphone here. Aside that, this is pretty much one of the fastest fingerprint sensors I've had to try out, and it actually feels seamless and you forget it's there, considering the fact that you'd most likely and usually have to tap on the power button to wake up your device. The only side left to talk about would be the left side, which houses a dual SIM tray and a dedicated micro SD card slot. That pretty much sums up the build on this plastic framed chassis. Now let's go back to the display. Specs wise, it is a 6.67-inch LCD panel with 1080p by 2400 pixels Full HD resolution, approximately 395 ppi density, 450 nits of brightness, Corning Gorilla Glass 5 protection, about 85 screen to body ratio here, a 20:9 aspect ratio, HDR10. I mean, there's a lot going on here. In simple terms, it's a decent display if you compare with other smartphone or devices around the same price points. But if you're coming from, let's say, a flagship device, you would definitely notice you struggle to see maybe a little bit outdoors. Some little discoloration around the punch hole, just the little things you should expect for about a $200 smartphone. I mean, that's what you're paying for, $250 for this device. Audio coming from the microphone here is typical of Xiaomi. Nothing really extraordinary, it gets the job done, and actually what you would expect from the smartphone. In terms of the speakers, they get pretty loud, although when maxed out, it tends to distort. And the annoying thing here is that you can easily block out this kind of speaker configuration while consuming media or gaming with the smartphone. Stereo speakers are the best, but then again, you have the option to use headphones here, all thanks to this 3.5mm jack port provided here. Performance on the Redmi Note 9S is where I really love this device. There are quite some things that are really exciting on this device, and the variant I have here is the 6 gigs 128GB internal storage here, and this device features the Snapdragon 720G processor, which is tuned for gaming obviously, around this mid-range tier. I know I said some good things about the Helio G70 processor, which was found on the Infinix Note 7. That was a fantastic device for gaming in terms of the raw performance there. but the performance on this device, the Redmi Note 9S, is that dialed up a notch. The 8nm chipset here makes using this device a smooth experience. I'm not saying you wouldn't notice the difference when coming from, say, the Snapdragon 865 processor or flagship devices. All I'm saying here is, if you're coming from any other mid-range device, you'd be really impressed with what's going on here. When it comes to battery life on the Note 9S, this is really solid. You get a 50-20 mAh battery from the smartphone, which clearly takes me to the end of the day with about 15% battery left on this device. I would say this is an 8-hour screen on time kind of smartphone. Charging this smartphone up from 0 to 100% using the charger, which is a 22.5 watt charger, took me about an hour and 40 minutes. Yeah, you have a 22.5 watt charger included in the box with this smartphone, but this smartphone has been tuned to use 18 watts and so it doesn't maximize the 22 watts charger within the box. So amazing battery life and about an hour, little over an hour and 30 minutes charge time for this device. That's what you get in the package. No skimping here. Speaking of the cameras, let me start with the front-facing cameras this time. In this centered punch hole notch thing going on here, you get a 60 megapixel front-facing camera, which is pretty great for what it does until you hit it with low light. At this point, lots of smartphones have decent cameras that are pretty much okay for their price, but do not necessarily perform well in low light condition. As far as videos go on this front camera, you get to max out at 1080p with no form of stabilization, and the colors, in my opinion, are a little less saturated than expected. Although the picture quality is quite crisp here, it isn't the best there is in terms of dynamic range, as you can see for yourself. Moving over to the rear cameras, you get a quad camera setup at the rear in this rectangular square shape housing. The main lens is a 48 megapixel sensor. 8 megapixel goes for the wide angle, 5 megapixels for the macro shot, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. You also get an LED flash below that. As far as picture quality, I actually love them here, and you get lots of options from the camera app, and the photos coming off the main lens are quite good with a wide dynamic range. You still get the whole poor performance whenever you are in low light, as with other smartphones around this price. And even flagship devices suffer from this too. But as far as dynamic range, color reproduction, this is great with good lighting. The photos from the ultra wide are not the greatest. They tend to appear a little softer than the main lens, which was expected obviously not to match the quality from the main lens. In fact, when you switch to the 48 megapixel mode on the main sensor, you get the pictures with better details at the expense of higher file size. Not really better details, I feel they are a little sharpened, and I tend to avoid those as the regular photos are pretty good enough for me. The macro lens does pretty much okay, better than a lot of budget devices with those 2 megapixel sensors for this purpose. Obviously, I don't like macro lenses on these budget smartphones as most of them are garbage. I mean, they're actually trash. But this was a little different and better than expected, and I found myself checking it out a couple more times, which isn't typical when I tested out other smartphones with macro lenses around this price point. For the portrait mode, it does a nice job at separating the subject from the background, giving you very usable photos actually. In terms of videos coming off the rear cameras on the Redmi Note 9S, you can record at up to 4K in resolution with the main lens or the main camera, but you would notice the poor stabilization from this setup. 1080p tends to give me better image stabilization while recording video, and I personally prefer this as far as the Redmi Note 9S is concerned. Speaking of 1080p, that's the max resolution you get from the ultra-wide lens in terms of video. Now, touching on the price, the 4GB 64GB variant retails for around 95,000 Naira or about $250, while the 64 128GB internal storage variant here retails for about 105,000 Naira, just a little over $250. I'd have the updated pricing in the description below if you want to check that out also. So what are my final thoughts on the Redmi Note 9S? For a $250 smartphone, there are a lot of things you should like about this device, ranging from the solid build, amazing performance for the price, great camera, and an all-round value king as far as the competitors in this price range are concerned. The pros here actually outweigh the cons on the smartphone, and I could easily recommend this smartphone for $250 to anyone right now. And there you have it, my review on the Xiaomi Redmi Note 9S. As promised, I'll make a comparison of this smartphone against the Infinix Note 7 pretty soon, so do not forget to subscribe to get the content too. Also, do not forget to like and share this video as it helps us a bunch. Other than that, it's goodbye, and I'm gonna catch you in the next one. Cuídate.